Good? Okay. Personality is an infosec disorder. No, disorders in the infosec community. Okay. This is real important, especially if you're watching this slideshow. I'm not technical. I didn't know how to make a slide deck till 24 hours ago. I'm married to a hacker. I go to cons as a wife. I don't have kids. We have dogs. And I hate public speaking. And I don't use my BS degree in psychology for other things. Like most people, they don't use their degree. My first conference was DerbyCon 2. And I didn't talk a lot, didn't know a lot of people. Joey was still relatively new. So I just kind of sat back in large groups and watched everybody interact. And I do still refer to most of you guys as you people. Because I don't know how to do half the stuff. And I don't understand the words that come out of your mouth half the time. So I was intimidated by most people, because when you're first here, it can be a little intimidating. And then I just started to, like, watch how people interacted with each other, and we kind of called me the Jane Goodall of InfoSec, because I would just watch and, like, be like, oh, that's not going to end well. Or I'd be like, oh, that was a good decision. So, and some of the new kids call me, like, the InfoSec mom, because, like, if you're under 20, I'm like, oh, don't do that. That's not good. That's why, so if you go to my Twitter handle, because somebody told me I gave them the wrong spelling on my Twitter handle, that's because I don't check it unless we're at conferences. That's why we always joke that I check Facebook. If you meet me, I'm like, they'll start talking and ask me, and I'm like, no, I check Facebook. So, not technical at all. So there's a couple definitions that make it easier in the talk, and personality disorder, subculture. Everybody has personality. Some people have fabulously vibrant and engaging personalities and charismatic. Other people, dull and flat, but everybody has one. It's just a genetic traits, composite of all of your characteristics that makes who you are. Disorders, basically, is when you don't have the ability to adjust and flow your personality with the external environments that you are constantly changing. And it's maladaptiveness. Okay, subculture is a sociology term where basically it is a culture of individuals who choose to create their own culture within the general population. And most people would agree that hackers are a subculture. And then within the hacker community, there is subcultures even after that. There's people that choose to completely compartmentalize their hacker lifestyle from the rest of their mainstream lifestyle. There's people that bring their whole families here. There's people that are only here because of work. There's people that are only here because they like to break things. So we kind of just, I'm going with the whole encompassing subculture. That's it. Okay. No, going. Okay, that's the really, see? That's the really fancy description. Now, I will say this. If anybody likes to learn about psychology, but, like, you don't necessarily like all the big words like me, the magazine Psychology Today is actually, it's well written, but it also is written so you don't have to necessarily have ever taken a psychology course. So it's online. A lot of my stuff came from that because I just like the readability of it. My other characteristics, the next couple screens will have the actual diagnosable lines. That's from the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. If you're a psych major, it's basically your Bible. It's how you learn how to diagnose people. So, my explanation to match with this is most personality disorders should not be diagnosed till after the age of 18. Tests administered to anybody between the age of 15 and 18, even 21, 22, you're going to come back most likely with a psychopathic tendencies. Because teenagers' brains that control their personality, their limbic, the frontal, and like the id, they're not fully developed, and they don't make rational decisions easily. Because their brains are still forming. Let's see. Most people with disorders will not seek out treatment because they don't think there's anything wrong with the personality. They're like, this is me, take it or leave it. No, Adrian's here. Okay. So, let's see. there's three clusters of There's three clusters of disorders. One is odd and eccentric. Next one is dramatic and emotional. Third is anxious and fearful. There's a couple in the first and the third, but I don't ever really see a lot of it, and those are a little bit more medically based. So the ones that are in bold are the ones I'm going to go over. Thanks, Bruce Potter, for telling me how to make that look that way. Let's see. Alright. So, okay. Each of the slides that has the diagnosis on it, there's 2 slides for the diagnosis, because I didn't realize you had to get your font really big so you guys in the back could see it. So, so these are where the definitions came from the DSM. I'm going to give you like the more fun stuff. Okay. So, one of the things, so in the subcultures, one of the things that people kind of take for granted when you show up to a conference is your boundaries and your rate of how you create a friendship is usually accelerated, because we're usually in one type of environment for 48, 72 hours, and there's lots of things that make it so it's you're less inhibited. Alcohol, just the fact that you're with people that have shared compatibilities and stuff like that. So some of these have a higher breeding ground for conferences versus just in general. Paranoid is a wonderful one for like that, because paranoid personalities, they have a tendency to be suspicious of all and mistrust many. I don't know any hacker like that. I don't know any of them, but they my note here says Hacksaw Supreme. So they when they're confronted about when they're confronted about their personality of being like, well, why are you like this? They're going to then turn on that person who confronted them because they think they're being attacked. Usually they're not. They demonize who is attacking them, and then they scan the environment for other people who are going to support what that person just did. I don't know anybody like that either in the hacker community, where they try to get their army of minions. And then friends are not viewed in a friendship. I use air quotes a lot. In a friendship way, like a traditional healthy friendship, they're more allies. How are you going to help me maneuver the situation to get people on my side? And they do also think that most people are beneath them, that they're not on the same level as everybody else in the population that they've created. And they're also it's also very cyclical, because they'll go have these friendships, and then they then get angry and mistrust them, and then they go and create another friendship with people that are going to support them, and it just repeats itself and repeats itself. Most personality disorders will end up being cyclical and repeat themselves because the person with the disorder doesn't think there's anything wrong, won't seek any way to change the behavior with cognitive therapy or pharmaceutical therapy, so they just keep going on that way. Let's see. Oh, they're also grudge holders. They're big fans of grudges. And then I put drama llama, because usually when you hold a grudge and you're trying to seek out allies, you like to cause drama. So, and then when the disorder is exacerbated, because you can have personality disorders and be functional and not have too many issues, but if you get to the point where you're no longer able to control it in a way that it's not adversely affecting you, that's when stuff becomes exacerbated. And that's usually when people get treatment because it's against their will. They're being hospitalized, or their families have made ultimatums. But when the disorder gets exacerbated, they become isolating, hypercritical, and controlling. Oh, hold on. There's the rest of those. And they rarely see it because they don't see a problem. So the next one is, Richard Nixon, paranoid. There we go. You'd be interesting what happens when you Google all of these with like celebrity. I don't know. I'm going to have to somebody's going to show me how to clear out my Google history so I don't get like Google ads with Richard Nixon. All right. Next one, antisocial behavior. Can anybody guess which is the biggest personality disorder in the hacker community? Antisocial behavior. Now, I don't have any like hard and true facts. This is just me observing and seeing it. Now, antisocial behavior is also one of the most researched disorders because majority of the incarcerated population in the United States has been diagnosed with it. And when you get to be a visitor of Department of Corrections, you can participate in testing. And nothing's usually detrimental or anything. You know you're being tested. It is one of the disorders with the highest rate of illegal behavior. And so they show complete disregard for the truth, have a history of illegal or socially inappropriate behavior. They exhibit irritable, possessive, recklessness, impulse, lacking love, loyalty, empathy. So for most of the hackers I know, it's the lack of impulse control, the slighted idea of what is socially acceptable, and illegal behavior. I mean, you may not get caught, but it's a gray area still, right? I don't know. They never let me do anything because Joey doesn't want to break the law. I'll go to second screen for that one. So there's more of it. So this is one of the only ones I could do like statistics to kind of give you an idea because it's the most researched. So we took DerbyCon attendees. There's about 2,000 of everybody. And we broke it down about 90% male, 10% female. And the population in the general population, about 1% of females suffer from antisocial and 5 to 6% of males suffer. So using the DerbyCon numbers, there's about between 90 and 100 attendees who are male who probably are diagnosable with antisocial behavior here. And 2 females. Yay! Because females usually have a tendency. The other thing I was reading is while men are more violent or disregarding personal property, women with antisocial disorder are more likely to be killers. Like, they're just crazy. So now the other thing that I found interesting was antisocial behavior has been they've changed it over the years of how it's referred to, because in the late 19th century it was referred to as being a psychopath, because the prevalent idea in psychology was that everything was genetic based and you inherited all your bad traits. And that's where, like, nature versus nurture came after in the last 70 years, I think. And then in the 20th century, they started referring to them as sociopaths. So lots of times, psychopath and sociopath are interchangeable. And lots of times when people hear the word psychopath or sociopath, they think automatically of serial killers or somebody that's just not able to function in normal society. It's not the case. More and more people have sociopathic tendencies and are completely, I don't want to say normal. I hate the word normal. They're completely adaptable to their surroundings, and people wouldn't even bat an eyelash. They're talking about. And then in the 20th century, they basically thought it was sociopath is how you were raised. So I kind of think it's a mixture of both. Like, you could have a perfectly normal upbringing, but somewhere in your genes, something got a little wonky. Or your genes could be perfect and you didn't get hugged enough as a kid. It's degrees of how you handle the rejection of how your behavior was. So, my antisocial person is, I didn't write it down. Oh, anybody know this movie? Yeah. Okay, so the reason why I did Gordon Gekko is because when you Google antisocial behavior people, majority of it is serial killers. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that there because I do definitely feel that you can have antisocial behavior and not kill people. You just, pardon my language, are a dick to most people because you don't care. So yeah, I also love that movie. Joey was like, you need to use Wolves of Wall Street. I was like, no, that's no, that was an imitation movie. So, the next one, I also talk really fast when I get nervous, sorry. Okay. Next one is borderline. I'm not a huge fan of borderline because I think it's a catch-all kind of for people who I don't know, I've just never been a fan of it. All those years when I was in school and stuff. There's about 30 million cases. They have intense bouts of anger, depression, anxiety, impulse, aggression, self-injury, substance abuse, or dependency. The more I looked into this one, I think this one is also a very prevalent one in the community, just because of the nature of what you guys usually do. It can be isolating, and you can remove yourself from situations very easily under the guise that you're working on something. And when I mean you guys, I'm not like you guys. You all seem very nice. So women, it usually manifests in eating disorders and cutting, the physical manifestations. Men, it's substance abuse, drinking and alcohol. Alcohol and drugs, be it pot or other. They do have a distorted sense of their self. There's frequent changes in what their long-term trajectories are for either career, family, friendship. And in this community, I have seen that a lot. And I think some people are just like, well, I got bored with it. But then when you see them at a conference, they're not necessarily hanging out with the same group of people either. And they're like, oh, well, they didn't entertain me anymore. So a lot of these have overlap. And there are times where you can have two personality disorders. I mean, you drew the short stick, but it's definitely like totally doable. There's a lot of comorbidities in psychiatry. Most all of these are all based with a level of depression with them too. Let's see. Oh, there's a higher rate of anxiety disorder, increased suicidal rate, increased use of pharmacologies. So the substance abuse can also be prescriptions. So, and this one's also hard to treat because people have ambivalence to, the person who's suffering from the disorder has the ambivalence to their, to the symptoms. Because they're just like, meh. That's what I call that one. That's like my meh disorder, because every time I've seen it portrayed, I'm like, I don't get it. They're just annoying. So, and my borderline personality disorder is, oh, there's the second one, sorry. This is why I wanted them on one slide. Oh, Amy Winehouse. She showed a lot of the tendencies, and then she died by the time she was, I want to say, like 28. So then the next two, they're on individual slides, but is histrionic and narcissistic. So there's more and more they're coming out saying that they feel like histrionic and narcissistic personality disorder are just the male and female versions of the same disorder, because a lot of the stuff overlaps, and they are finding that one gender is more prevalent in one versus the other. Histrionic, 2/3 of the diagnosed cases are women. And women, their perceived by others as vain, shallow. Let me do it. Oh, Kim Kardashian. She's my narcissistic. So yeah, I actually had to Google Kim Kardashian and I didn't like it. Like seriously, I had to figure out how to get rid of the Google because I don't want Kardashian crap. Then there's the narcissistic stuff. So basically with the histrionic, vain, shallow, self-dramatizing, immature, overly dependent, and selfish. I've never met anybody in infosec that's like that. They also did a study that said that prettier women have a higher rate of the disorder. And there was actually a qualitative way of determining how pretty the person was. They do it with facial measurements and other stuff. When I was reading it, it got really convoluted on how they assign the prettiness. And they think that the attractiveness hinders a person's ability to develop their maturity level appropriately. So there's a little note here. The next time you think you want to say to a little girl, aren't you so cute? Ask them about their math or their skill or their intelligence. Don't focus on what they look like on the outside. Because you don't go up to a little boy and go, you're so cute. Well, you might, but they usually stop at about 6. Little girls, it usually goes 10 or 11. It's usually a go-to for most people. So, can anybody guess who may be my person for the narcissistic tendencies? It is... Dun, dun, dun! So, I will say this, for most of the... I just like that picture. I'm like... for histrionic and narcissistic, histrionic is probably more likely to seek out treatment because they're having women in general are more likely to seek out therapeutic measures, but usually it's because their intimate relationships are not appropriately growing, so that's why they're seeking it out. And it's done by basically relearning your social skills and relearning how to appropriately respond in an environment where you're used to one way of being treated and not for another. So, excuse me. Narcissistics, much more prevalent in males. They're constantly seeking feedback to determine what people think of them. And I put a note on here, Twitter, because you get your instant gratification in 140 characteristics. And I mean, how many Twitter wars have I seen? So, and other social media, it provides an artificial reinforcement of how great you are. Of course, you're going to feel like you're great when everybody keeps giving you a thumbs up on something you did. Let's see. Most with a narcissistic personality disorder, if they determine that, I don't want to keep looking at him. If they determine that if they've failed at something, they're not going to be overly upset that they did it. They're just real like meh, nonchalant, like, well, maybe I screwed up. Maybe it's people around me. More likely, they're going to blame people around them because they don't think that they can do anything wrong. These friendships are difficult because this is definitely a population where they're not going to think that anybody is on their level. They have no equivalent peer. And everybody that they do have is a subordinate, and they're very demanding in their need for constant feedback and love and attention, but they will not give that feedback. They won't give that level back to who's ever beneath them because they don't feel like they deserve it because they're not deemed worthy. Few seek treatment because they don't think it's a problem. I don't think I've ever met a narcissist who's like, I'm a narcissist. And I think if they do admit it, they're probably not a tried and true narcissist. Avoidant is my last one. I think I'm good. Ah, damn. Okay. So this one is kind of, I include it because there's a lot of, one of the things I do find is that there's a lot of people with anxiety disorders in the community. And avoidant disorder is basically an anxiety disorder to like the 100th, 10th Googled. I learned that one last night. That's the one with lots of zeros, right? And basically, the difference between the phobia and the disorder is, like when you're a kid, you were a shy kid. If you had the phobia, if you have the disorder, you were extremely timid and like withdrawn. Like nothing got you out of your comfort zone to be like, I'm going to go play with that kid. Nothing. Like you had adverse physical reactions to having to go make friends. And basically, the preoccupation is you're going to be rejected, and if you are accepted into it, you're constantly reassessing the environment you're in, that people like you and they want to be friends with you. You're not even being able to be in the moment of having the relationship because you're constantly reassessing how people and the interpretation and everything like that. I do feel like infosec makes this personality. This is a good personality for infosec because you do go long stretches where you don't have to interact with anybody. And then, and you have types of jobs where if you're not on a team or you don't have to be in the teamwork environment, you can do lots of things and never have to interact with anybody. You're just on your computer. And I don't know how much you would see them here because there's a lot more interaction. But I do know that people come here with their anxiety disorders because they're trying to work through it. I feel like avoidant personality is definitely one of those ones where, there's a second thing, that a little bit more overcomable with stuff if people can identify with it. And my avoidant person is Charlie Brown, because he constantly goes back to trying to kick the football, even though he knows Lucy's going to take it, but he's like, and he's constantly feeling rejected. Like, that was like, he was the #1 thing when you like pop it up. I was like, oh, who knew to ruin my childhood memories? My note here was I don't think they easily attend conferences. I guarantee you they're probably not going to one every month. They're probably, if they're here, they built up for the last 6 months to come here. DEF CON, I'm imagining, is probably paralyzing for someone with an avoidant personality disorder. So, but the other side, it's, if you go to these larger conferences, they're so big, you don't have to interact with anybody. So, okay. The main thing, and I have 27 seconds, the main reason why I did this was how to have healthy interactions with these people since we're in these environments is basically make sure that you are aware of what boundaries you need to maintain for your own self-health. And like I said, it can be difficult in this setting because we speed up. Most friendships have a natural course of time frame, days, months. When you're in a conference setting, it's hours. You have meals with everybody, you have unlimited alcohol and stuff like that. And then choose carefully how you want to engage people you've met at conferences after the conferences. So like my Facebook, I'm on it, but I don't just accept any friend requests because my lifestyle on Facebook is much different than my lifestyle on Twitter. You can talk to me all day you want on Twitter, that's fine. So I know some people have much more open Facebooks than they do Twitters and stuff like that. So it's basically how you want to choose to keep engaging with individuals that you've met. I usually generally say follow your gut. My spidey senses are usually never wrong. Okay. And that's it. I'm done. I didn't throw up! Oh.